Hi, good morning, Ronnie. How are you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. I'm glad to be here, Alex, man. It's good to see you.
Good. The plan today, obviously, you've been a member of our group for a while now.
Yep.
And I've been really impressed with your development, with your story, and I just kind of wanted to get it out there. Um, so the goal today is just to talk through the last couple months and what you've been doing and how that's been working in your life. So
Sounds great.
that's going to be the plan, and we'll go from there. So just to start us out, can you give us a little bit of your background? Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Wherever you
Yeah.
want to go.
My name is Ronnie Austin Brammer. I'm from Arkansas, but currently I live in Kiowa. I have an awesome wife. Her name is Mandy. Best decision I ever made was asking her to marry me. That's for sure. I got four kids. They are 12, 10, and 5'3". Lorelei, Phineas, Oakley, and Spurgeon, named after Charles Haddon Spurgeon, my favorite revivalist. But yeah, we live out in Kiowa, and it's kind of on a ranch, so we have some like cows and chickens, and we run a dog ranch. We got all these dogs, like so. I'm constantly covered in dog hair, and we have lots of eggs. But that's kind of my life. I'm a home inspector. That's what I do professionally. I've been in the construction business my whole life, and I think to kind of understand my story is to know a little bit about where I'm from, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I grew up in Rudy, Arkansas, which is like a tiny community, part of the Fort Smith, Northwest Arkansas, River Valley metro area. And little town of 72 people. That's where my grandparents bought property. My dad lives there now. My grandparents live next door. They bought the other house next door. It's kind of like a compound, and family is really important. Yeah, it's like a Foxworthy. It's a living, breathing Jeff Foxworthy joke. The Bremer compound. Seriously, it's like old cars in the yard and an old bus and double wide in between. Anyways, um, growing up there is most of my memories of my childhood. But I lived with my mom, which was in a neighboring town that was kind of bigger. So I was kind of a city kid, country kid at the same time. And even though I grew up in the Bible Belt, I wasn't churched. My parents didn't go to church. They didn't take me to church. Only time I ever went to church is when my stepdad took us to mass. And so that was kind of my experience of church, was occasionally going to mass and then getting invited to like VBS or some kids thing by a neighbor, and those are great, but they're kind of like a carnival. It's like cotton candy, bubble gum, pizza, some sort of puppet show. And so my understanding of what church was that. And there's nothing wrong with that stuff necessarily. Like I love great children's ministries. I love VBS, but when they don't have Jesus gospel elements or the Holy Spirit is not there, that can be a problem. And I think just as a kid experiencing some of those things, I didn't really understand what the church was or how it was supposed to function. And the first church I went to, actually, um, I rode my bike there because my parents weren't going to church, right? And so I had these questions about reality that were crippling. Like, I was having panic attacks at 9, 10 years old. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what I was experiencing because of I at the time I had questions about the vastness of just the universe. Like, it was so big that it crushed my little soul, and I felt like panic because of it. And I had these questions about reality that just weren't being answered. And I thought church might be a place to figure that out.
You know, I want to pause here for a second because I actually knew the bike story. I did not know any of the panic tied to that. Like, what, as you said, you were 9 or 10 at the time.
Yeah.
What, as a 9 or 10 year old, led you to believe that riding your bike to a church would have any impact
Dude,
on
I
you?
had I had questions like, okay, I know Rudy is in Arkansas, and I know Arkansas is in America, and I know America is in the world, and I know the world is in the solar system. I know that there's other stuff outside of that space, but I don't really know what it is or understand it. And then what's outside of that? That terrified me. And I would think like God was putting the gravity of eternity in my heart, and I didn't know what to do with it. And the only place I could think of to go try to figure that out was church. Because, like I said, I'd been to some church events and had heard about God, but didn't really understand him, and thought, man, that's got to be the place where I can figure it out. And I'd never really been to a church service necessarily. I'd just been to, well, I guess mass, but that's a little bit different than the contemporary evangelical model of Sunday mornings. So I don't know how to answer that question other than that was the inclination in my heart. And I think God put it there. Like, that's the only way I could answer that, is that the Holy Spirit probably tugged on my heart and said, hey, why don't you try going to church? So I rode my bike to the local mega church that was in my neighborhood. And I show up and they're like, hey, who are you? And I'm like, hi, I'm Austin. That's my middle name. And in Arkansas, that's kind of what I go by. It's my family name. And they go, great. Who are your parents? And I'm like, Steve and Lynn. And they're like, where are they? I'm like, they're in bed. And they're like, well, how did you get here? I was like, I rode my bike. They were like, um, okay, I guess check yourself in and out. And here's kids church, check it out. And so
We were very different at the respective ages.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would not have done any of that.
This is like in 92 too. So I mean, we were a little bit looser with like check-in protocol and whatnot. But I started going to that church just on my bike. I didn't really get my questions answered, but on my third attempt to go, the neighbors saw me and they were like, hey, where are you going on your bike? And I'm like, I'm going to church. And they're like, you want to go with us? And I was like, sure, why not? And so I hopped in their van and just started going to church with them. And it was a fundamental, very conservative Southern Baptist SBC church. And God bless them. They tried their best, but there was probably a little bit of damage done there. I'm not sure. I was young. And that church went through a split. And so in my young mind, I was like, oh, kind of like my parents got a divorce. So church is similar to that. And
Okay.
then the next church I went to was the Methodist church that I was involved with Boy Scouts in. And the reason I went there is because I was an orphan. I didn't have parents that went to these institutions with me. I was there alone. And so when there was a split, I kind of got lost in the shuffle. And that happened at the second place I went to. They had a split there too. And there was a scandal actually. Um, the senior pastor did some things and that's kind of why the church split. And at that point, I had just kind of given up. I was like 15, 16, and I was kind of like, church is dumb. There's no answers here. This isn't giving me what I thought it would give me. And I moved out of my mother's house of that metropolitan area and moved into Rudy with my dad, and started going to a small school. So I was at a big 5A school and I went down to a 2A school. And that was a different breed of folk. I mean, they were country folk, redneck country folk. And I got exposed to things that I kind of hadn't been exposed to before. And one of those things was like, that's when I started drinking at 17, was with one of my buddies. And within a year, and it was great. I was like, oh man, this magical elixir kind of numbs those questions, numbs those anxieties.
Yeah.
It releases a lot of inhibition and it makes me this fun, wild, wacky guy that everybody loves. And that was great for about like a year until I almost like ruined my life at the age of 17. I got into a lot of trouble and I kind of ran away from that. When I graduated, I decided to get out of town and I went to like the local state school, which was about 2 hours away. And I proceeded to major. The major I selected was partying my face off. And I was so good at it that after a semester and a half, they were like, you know what? You can go back home. And so
You should
there
just
I
go to
was.
that profession.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. You can go back home. Just go be a redneck. And so when I came back to Rudy, I started wanting to hang out with my old friends. And the guy that introduced me to drinking, and I feel comfortable talking about this because he would feel comfortable talking about this. Um, he wasn't partying anymore. He was going to church. And that's because he met a girlfriend who he was going to marry. And she was dragging his butt to church because she wouldn't tolerate that nonsense.
That is sometimes how he does that.
Yeah. And I was like, bro, you're not fun anymore. This girl is running. He's like, no, bro, church is great. You should come. And they really are good people. And I was like, dude, I've tried that and it was terrible. I don't want to be involved. And how frank can I be on this podcast? As brutally honest as I want to be, or
I'm okay with it. If we can avoid testing, that's probably ideal, but
right. So he told me, come to youth group. I was 19. He's like, come to youth group. There's free pizza. And I had smoked some weed that day and I was coming down. So I kind of had the munchies and I was like, hey, free pizza. That sounds great. So I show up to this youth group meeting for the free pizza. You know, I'd smoked just a couple hours earlier. And I meet this missionary named Bella Eid. He was a Frenchman that was a missionary to Nigeria, I believe. And he talked about Jesus like he was alive. He talked about God like he was real. And I was like, whoa, all those questions I had, I think this guy might have some answers. And so I got connected to that church and it was great. They really loved me, even though I was an orphan, even though I wasn't part of the family, they accepted me. And that's one thing that church did really, really well was loving people and seeing people and meeting them where they were at. Unfortunately, like most churches, especially in the South, discipleship, specifically for men, was kind of a weak point. And so as long as I showed up on Sunday, it was assumed I was all right. So I had this pattern in my mind that kind of developed. Because what happened is after that initial like honeymoon phase of being there, I started slipping.
This is you in your 20s at this point?
19, 20, 21. I got drinking age, right? And so by the time I was 21, what was happening is I was showing up Sunday hungover, feeling bad about my decisions, thinking I'm going to do better. And then things would be great for a couple days, but the closer it got to the weekend, the more there would be that pull to go do whatever. And I would just repeat that cycle over and over and over again. And by the time I was 22, I realized that wasn't going to work anymore. And I had the opportunity to move to Colorado because my youth pastor at that church was from Colorado. And he went through this program at a mega church out there. And he had been taking our youth group there every year. And I'd been going and I loved it. It was awesome. I had these great spiritual highs when I was there, but I kept fighting. I was in that cycle, man. I just couldn't get out of it. And so he convinced me in 2006, I was 22 years old, to move to Colorado. And that was great. I finally got some of the freedom and breakthrough I was looking for, but it was all based on, and I'm looking back at it now, it makes sense to me. I was bootstrapping my way through it. I'd gotten to a new place. I'd gotten away from the old friends. I'd gotten away from the old environment. And when I was there, I could do pretty good. And it was great. I was towing the line, and the program I was in, it had certain regulations of behavior that you had to adhere to be in the program, of which was like no drinking, no smoking, no extramarital sex. You couldn't be married and be part of the program. You had to be single. You had to have a job. You had to pray a certain amount every week. So we had prayer meetings we were required to go to. We had to read the Bible a certain amount every week. And we had an accountability group that we would go through all of these things to make sure that we were adhering to the standard. And that program was awesome. It was great. I don't think they did everything right. I don't think we did everything right. But the heart was to try to disciple. It was a discipleship program. We were trying to disciple young people and trying to build a prayer movement. And there's a lot of people that had success in that program. There's other people that have a lot of hurt from that program. I was fortunate to just catch the right relationships while I was there, and the program was an awesome experience for me. And I was there for 6 years. So I started out as just a lowly intern. And because I was 22, I was older than most of the interns that were there. Most of them were like 18 or 19. Because I was 22, I could legally drive the vans that for insurance purposes, I could drive our tour vans. So all of a sudden we were doing there was a worship ministry out of this mega church that was national. And so we would take some of our bands on the road to do prayer meetings and worship nights at local churches across the country. And I started out driving vans for them. I got into production. So I was like a tech in a sense. I did sound work. I gaffed things, just whatever was needed. I would stack chairs, whatever. And I kind of worked my way to bring value to the program. And eventually they brought me on as a like volunteer staff member. During that whole time, when I was there, I was towing the line. But if I went back home, I would get loose and I would party a little bit with old friends, but then I'd feel bad and come back and get back on the wagon. And so there was this oscillation that continued during that season. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame because of that. And I made a lot of mistakes. And there were times that I would have to repent to my leaders, like, hey, I kind of screwed up over break. This is what I did. And they would go through restoration process stuff with me. But it's not the program's fault. It was my approach. I was approaching it legalistically because I didn't know any other way. And a lot of my church experience from my youth, I was imprinting onto that space. I don't know how to explain it any better than that, other than I was being a knucklehead. Then I met Mandy, and she really helped me navigate a lot of the more quirky things about my personality. And I started to grow because I had this amazing woman that was partnering with me. Right when I met Mandy, I don't know how much you want to hear about this, but that's when my little sister passed away. She was 20 years old. She passed away in an accident. It was a spring break incident. And that rocked my world. That really messed me up. I had to walk with my mother through the loss of her daughter. And by that time, my stepdad and her were divorced. And so I kind of had to be the support for her and myself and the rest of my family. And because I was at a like discipleship school, there was a lot of pressure put on me to be like, who's going to pray? Ronnie Austin, you want to pray? So like my family was looking to me just because I was in the discipleship school. Oh, he must be spiritual and know what to do. And so I had to carry a lot of that. Don't fault my family for that at all. It's just how we survived that season. It was terrible. It was terrible. She's the only daughter on that side of my mom's family. And it's like, we lost our princess and it jacked us up forever. We haven't got back to what that was. I don't think we ever will. And that's a whole nother conversation about grief and everything. But, that's how I started ministry, was out of tragedy. While I was at this institution, we had a pastor scandal. Our pastor was caught in an immoral situation and was asked to step down. There was a shooting at our church. So we had to bury two of our students who got shot in the parking lot. And so that was kind of my early ministry experience was seeing a church go through tragedy, seeing a church go through transition. And it was different than what I experienced back home. Cause they honestly did it pretty well. And I grew through that. But after being on staff for 2 years, I've been there for a total of 6 years. I was on staff for 2 years, 2 of those years. My wife and I moved to Portland, where we went to another mega church. And as soon as we got there, the pastor got diagnosed with cancer and had to step down. And so again, we were on part of the leadership team for one of the campuses there. we were there helping navigate that place through. We were part of that transition period. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make here is whenever you commit to a church body, of course there's going to be messiness. Of course there's going to be pain. There's going to be terrible tragedy. And unfortunately, sometimes your leaders are going to let you down. Sometimes people are going to let you down. But I think that's why we're there, is because it is a broken world. It is messy. And I
Yes.
learned, go ahead.
Sorry. Why? I feel like, I mean, I obviously know a lot about your story, but even in this, I've picked up a few new elements. You've been through an awful lot of church hurt and church adjacent hurt, however you
Grossness.
want to
Yeah.
qualify whatever that is. Why why have you chosen to stick with the faith? I feel like a lot of people would have said this is all crazy nonsense. I don't want to deal with this anymore.
That is a great question. I think, and this goes back to the
I'm not saying you're
service.
wrong,
No, 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 no. I think,
but I think a lot of people would have said this is dumb. I'm over this.
dude, when I was a kid, I didn't, oh man, I'm not bashing my parents. All right. But I didn't have a whole lot of help to figure out life. I had to do it on my own. I had to bootstrap it. And so I took that mentality. I brought that with me into my faith. And that's why I got caught up in legalism so much. The do's and the don'ts and grit your teeth and figure it out on your own. And so it didn't matter what was thrown at me. It was just like, I'm gonna keep plowing along. I think that's the best way I can answer that question is my I don't know. I guess I'm stubborn. I see the world.
Did you find that structure reassuring? Was it a structure that you would? Not a lot of people are drawn to legalism. That's
Uh,
I for sure am not drawn to legalism.
there is some comfort in the prescriptive checklist. If I do these things, I'm good, and when I don't do these things, I'm bad. But that's what keeps you coming back to the checklist, I think. I would say that's probably the best way I could describe it.
I was just curious.
No, that's a great question. Cool. Interestingly enough, through my connections at the internship program, I got offered a youth pastor position in Castle Rock, and moved to Castle Rock. And there, I had a pastor. His name is Mark Marble, and that man put a lot of effort into trying to disciple me and shape me. And I probably think it was the first time I'm in a lot of my experience that I had individual discipleship on that level from a man that was twice my age. That he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot and shaped a lot of my character as it is today. Um, but we didn't get along. There's a lot of times that we bucked heads, and it's just because I had these hard mentalities and thoughts about um, church and the way it should be done that I think were wrong. And we kind of butt heads on that. But whenever I moved there to that church, uh, we got there on April 1st, 2015. On August 8th of that same year, my birthday, just a couple of months later, 6 months later, his wife died of stage 4 ovarian cancer, which that was, I'm a young youth pastor. I'm trying to figure out the ropes of how to like disciple and mentor young people. And I'm using the playbook that I was given from the 90s evangelical church models, right? And within a couple of months, I'm already dealing with, like, whenever that happened, Mark was man, that was like the darkest day of his life. Fortunately, I'd been through a couple of those with my own mother. I'd been through that with different leaders at the churches I'd had experience with. So I had some like tools in my tool belt. I know how much you hate that. I had some experience in walking those dark roads, and so I was just there to support him in that season, and that was trying. Also, during that time, um, one of the students I had pastored or was responsible for whenever I was at the internship program, he committed suicide. We had another student that was in our ministry at that time that committed suicide. And if you remember this part of the story, the youth pastor that convinced me to move to Colorado in the first place, he committed suicide. And so within that 5 year period, those were pretty heavy events.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember each of those events and feeling like I'm walking with someone. Their life, this day, there's not going to be another day worse than this. Burying their son, not going to be a worse day. It doesn't matter what happens. Like, this is the worst. I was there for a couple of those, for a couple of different people. Um, and I was failing as a youth pastor for sure. We were terrible. We tried our best, but we just were not very good. And after that suicide of our own student, I was like, forget this, forget the playbook, forget everything I know. Like, we're just going to try to take care of people. And I kind of got this mentality of church should be a social justice, community loving, community center thing. And we tried that. And it was actually pretty successful. But then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, um, I hung up the proverbial smock, retreated to Kiowa, and kind of said, and this is back, whenever I was a kid, I said, forget church, it's dumb. I kind of said the same thing. It was like, this is dumb. I'm done. Ministry is stupid. It's obviously not effective at all, at least the way that we're doing it. And I'm just going to try to be a churchgoer guy, help out where I can, but I'm definitely not going to consider being spiritually responsible for people anymore. I just don't have the capacity. And that's kind of where some of the old bad habits started slipping back in. That's where I started to lose a little bit of control of the things I was bootstrapping for so long. Um, you know, I think everyone during the COVID year picked up a couple bad habits, but I certainly started drinking a lot more, started not really caring about spiritual practices. Like I said, forget the checklist. Like, I wasn't praying, I wasn't reading the Bible. I was kind of over it. And that's where the legalism path ends, I think, is you're in your doing, it's never good enough. And you can try. So this is one thing we did at the internship. We asked people to sign a vow, and the vow had four principles on it. One is, I'm going to spend time with God every day. Another is, I'm going to fast something once a week. Another is, I'm going to live a lifestyle that's holy and consecrated to the Lord. And the last one was, I'm going to be on, I'm going to be on mission with my life. I love all those principles. I love them all. The way I approached it was signing this contract. Therefore, I know what I should do. And once I sign the contract, I'm going to do that and everything's going to be good. But inevitably, I would mess it up. I would fail. I was setting myself up for failure because there's no way I could I was setting a standard for myself that I could not keep because it was on my own
You have a
strength.
guilt multiplier on there.
Yeah. And that kept me coming back for sure. While I was in Kiowa, we actually got the opportunity to serve just as a sound guy. Just as a sound guy, serving a local church. And the worship experience was not what we were used to. Wasn't super like polished. There were no instruments on the stage, and that was from their 80s. Like, that's something they adopted in the 80s. Like, we're not going to have instruments on the stage, and they just kept it into 2000. And I met with the worship pastor, and I was like, "Bro, what are your goals here? Because I can help you, but we may have to change some things." And I had the opportunity to serve there in a really like non-pastoral, non-responsible, just be there and serve. And it was actually really healthy. It was really healthy because the expectation was just, I was just a volunteer. Just show up if you can. If you don't, there's a lot of grace. And we ended up doing some really cool things at that church. Like all those things I learned, they weren't for naught. All those experiences, all those things I learned, I ended up bringing with me into that place. But I still was in this dark cycle of not breaking through, and mainly it was the alcoholism. It was just becoming a problem, and I knew I had a problem in like 2020, 2021, because I took one of those online tests. Do I have an alcohol problem? And it told me I did, and I was like, well, I'm gonna fix this. And so I bootstrapped my way through it and just like, I'm not gonna drink, and that worked for a little while. But the core belief down in my soul, and this is specifically about alcohol, was wrong for me. For me, it was wrong, and I didn't know that. And so I was fighting a battle that I was never going to win until that core belief had changed. But there was no way for that core belief to change until some other things had to change that I hadn't dealt with ever during that whole process. And so that's around the time I met you. My wife said, "Hey, I feel like the Lord is telling us to move." And that was just about a year and a half ago. And I was like, okay. And whenever she talks, usually I consider that maybe the Holy Spirit. Odds are it is. I better listen to it. And if not, that's okay. I still made her happy. So it's like a win-win. So we started going to the church that you guys were at. Very quickly met you and and Ron. I can mention Ron's name, right? Yeah. So I met you and Ron, and got involved with the men's group you guys were leading. And there was something different about the approach of the group that really caught my interest. And the way I would describe it is most of the experiences I had in discipleship in the past were either very flippant, like non-intentional, just like, "Hey guys, how are you doing? Good. Are you good? I'm good. Good. You good? Okay, we're good. Great. All right. So let's talk about the football game." Or it was very prescriptive. Like, did you do this, that, or the other or not? Or it was a book club, or it was a mix of some of that. The first night I sat down with you, I heard guys, it wasn't like we're going through the checklist or we're going through the book club. Guys were just sharing what was on their heart because Jesus put it there. That's kind of what I saw. And it felt a little bit different than some of the things that I experienced in the past. Let me say this. The program I was in, fantastic people. I love them to death. I think we did the best we could with what we had. And sure, there's a lot of things I would do differently. And I'm not trying to knock the process that we had at the time. But I think today, 2025, where the church in the West is at today, that model doesn't work. It just doesn't.
We can. I am open for getting to the theological stuff a little later on, but
yeah, you're good.
Let's hone in on your story. So I
Sure.
would have guessed that we'd known each other about a year and a half because I know that we kind of officially met in December. I was pretty sure that was.
Yeah. So we started. Mandy said, "Hey, I feel like we need to move." That's when the process started, but we didn't start coming to Thrive until uh it was a Flourish event in the fall, I think, that we started coming, and that was right before December.
Yeah, and then you came to the men's event.
Yeah.
But anyway, I find it interesting because you didn't really engage very strongly with the group right away.
No.
Like you seem to just kind of show up intermittently here and there. I mean, you were on the short list of people that we kind of knew were tangential to it. Like you showed up enough that we kept you on the roster, but Um, you didn't really do much with it for a while. What was, how did that transition?
Well,
Because I would say in the last 6 months, and that's a fuzzy number, but I would say that in the last 6-ish months, you've started taking this really very seriously. And I'm just
yeah,
curious what kind of crossed the line for you. Like, what was the idea that, not the idea experience, whatever it was that pushed you to a new level of participation there? Because for a while, you were a little hesitant to show up a group and didn't particularly, weren't a particularly strong participant most of the nights that you were there.
yeah, I can
That's, if
answer.
that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And I'll tell you why. When I first started coming, I was like, I want to be a part of this. I need this. This is what I'm hungry for this. I miss accountability from the old days. But at that point, I was drinking every day. And I knew that that was I think deep down in my guts, I was scared. I was scared to engage in the process. And I think I expressed this to you a couple times. Like I'm terrified of the discipleship process because I'm just scared of getting too deep. I don't want to know what's down there. I don't
Yeah.
want to open that box. So I think I was afraid to open the box of my soul, knowing that there's probably some stuff down there that's scary and I don't want to deal with it. But then there was this other part of me that wanted to be around those men. And so I think to answer your question, you, Ron, some of the other guys that were participating, I really wanted to be around because I could feel the warmth and light that was coming out of them, out of that process. But I myself was a little scared of it. Almost like I see the campfire, I want to get near, but I don't want to get too near because then I'm going to be seen or I'm going to be exposed or I might get burnt. And also, I was working like crazy. And so there were constantly schedule conflicts with me participating in the group. And it wasn't until, to answer your question about what crossed the line, it wasn't until the groups got shut down and it went outside of the church building. Something clicked in my heart of a sense of urgency, like I don't know. I think it was something a little bit spiritual, like in my mind or in my heart, really. It felt like there is something that doesn't want this to happen, and it needs to happen.
Or at least someone at that.
Right. And I was like, no, 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 no. This needs to happen, and it doesn't need to be shut down. And all of a sudden, I think my intensity got more. I didn't care anymore about being exposed, and so I was more willing to show up and engage. And then one night, it was like you had opened up the floor to Curious Moments, and I was like, "Eff it, here we go." And I told everybody what I was willing to tell them. I was only going as deep as I was willing, my vulnerability would allow me to go. And that was, I'm super stressed and I feel like I don't have any time and I'm losing the relationship with my kids and my wife and I just feel like I can't grab a hold of them. I was finally willing to go as deep as my vulnerability would allow me. And that
Mhm.
was to say, I'm so busy and I'm so stressed and life is out of control and I feel like my relationship with my kids and my wife is suffering and I just don't know what to do. And so in
Which was
group,
all, which was all true. Yeah.
all true, all true.
And was something that I had observed in you for a while. So it didn't feel in that moment like you were holding back. And to clarify, the style of group that we run, uh, the goal is to set the stage so that if people want to step up and participate, they can, but that's not something that we would ever force on people. So we were
Totally.
perfectly content for you to just kind of observe
Just kind of show up, watch, and throw
for
out some
for a
Bible
while.
verses every
Yeah,
now and then.
because there needs to be, you need to gain trust and buy-in if you're going to expect vulnerability from, I think men in particular, but from anyone really.
Yeah, I think
All you can do is set the stage and then allow them to kind of step in voluntarily. Like
just a smack.
I don't think anything would have happened if 6 months prior I had forced you to say something.
No,
Not
nothing would
I have that
nothing would
superpower.
happen. Nothing would happen. No, and this
Right.
is why is because I was in places where that was the expectation. Like you show up, okay, here's a standard. Are you doing all these things? What are you looking at on the internet? All that stuff. And of course, you don't want to share that.
No.
You don't want to. You don't want to be like, well, yeah, here's all my garbage. Here you go. like in our culture, being that vulnerable and being that open and honest about the things that you're probably carrying with shame and guilt and the only time I didn't feel shame and guilt is whenever I was bootstrapping my way through it and following the checklist. And then if I wasn't following the checklist, I sure as hell didn't want to tell anybody about it. I wanted to pick myself back up and get back on the wagon or whatever. And
And
so
pretend that nothing happened.
yeah, and pretend yes, and pretend that everything's good. Everything's good. My side of the street's clean. We're good. We're good. I'm still on board.
Yep.
Yes, yes, and amen. And I think a lot of men in the church are there. They're hiding stuff, feel shame and guilt about stuff. And when you get them to a place of like a discipleship space and provide that opportunity to be vulnerable or to be honest, it's like, yeah, I'm just really struggling with pride. Or
Like, yeah, okay.
okay, sure, we all are. It's like some sort of sterile, non-vulnerable thing, and that's got to change. That's got to change because as long as we're keeping the box closed and we're afraid of those demons that are in there, they have all the power. They have all the power, and we have no power as men. We think we're strong. We think we're looking good, doing right. But as long as those demons in the box are keeping themselves hidden and in the shadows, they have all the power.
Yeah, and
Anyways,
men, we just tend to isolate. It's just what we do, and it's the easiest way. It's the easiest line of attack is to just get somebody alone, get them frustrated. Well, you brought up COVID earlier. I wonder how much spiritual damage was done over COVID. Like
I
with
yeah,
churches shutting down, everyone going to their home and being on their own, watching the news, trying to figure out what's going on. Like, uh, I wonder how detrimental that was to faith broadly. Um, because I remember hearing about the lockdown idea, just looking at my wife and going, we will not do that. Like we cannot be isolated from all people. That's not a thing. you don't
yeah.
you don't get to be isolated and healthy.
No,
Uh,
and I'm an extreme extrovert. Like I have to be around people. I was driving my
I'm
family
an
up
extreme
the
introvert, and
wall.
I still know.
right, right. Like it was,
I
but
hate everybody. Um, I don't hate anyone, but I prefer being alone. I very strongly prefer being alone. Um, and even I looked at that and was like, no chance. There's no chance. This is the unhealthiest thing I've ever heard in my life. Um, so I wonder. Yeah, I think isolation is a massive problem in our society and has only gotten worse in the last handful of years as it's become something of normalized in the culture.
I think, or yeah, I would say this from my experience, and this is speaking specifically with addiction as it pertains to alcohol. Um, the enemy wanted me ashamed,
Mm.
guilt ridden, and isolated. That's where he wanted me, because in that place, Alex, I didn't have the courage to be a full participant. It was easy for me to hide behind running a soundboard and pretending to be, not pretending, trying to be spiritual,
Yeah.
knowing while I have all these things that probably need to be corrected. And that journey took a long time to figure that out. Like I didn't really believe I had a drinking problem until like I said, in 2020, 2021, I had I had gotten sober for 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 a little while, and that was on my own strength. But shortly after that, I was like, I got this under control. I'm good. What's the harm? Little beer here and there, no big deal. And over time, it became this thing that had me in shackles. And then finally, whenever and it was in group, it was in group. So this is what happened. I confessed to you guys that life was out of control and I was super stressed and so busy and didn't have healthy relationships with my wife and kids. And I'm just blah. Uh, the first belief that was picked at or attacked or challenged was in my mind, if I remember it correctly. Um, is spending time with God important to you? And if it is, how can you create space for that? If it is important, let's create some space for it. And so I decided to start um, listening to the Bible in my Jeep on the way to work because I have an hour commute or so every day. And I'm going to listen to worship music. What's that?
Can I add a little context here?
Yeah, sure.
So that was on the tail end of a season that I had volunteered to do some one-on-one coaching with some guys that I thought would need it or appreciate it or whatever. I just had some extra capacity in my schedule, and so I offered some one-on-one coaching, and I had offered it to you, hoping that you would take it, and you didn't.
No.
Right. But but I remember I coached another guy, and we don't need to name him, on this exact issue. Like in my head, if I can just find whatever passion exists in you, whatever passion you have for God, I don't care how much of it there is. Like I've said, I would rather you have one passionate 3-minute conversation with God every day than read the Bible for an hour. Like
Yeah.
just whatever the max level of passion that you can generate is, let's start with that and use that as a seed to grow over time. And so I think that part of your decision to interact with God in the car, which was, as I recall, your first step as well, was I had made the same recommendation to him, and he'd been doing it for a period of time because he found that driving to work was kind of the optimal time for him to engage in that way. And
Yeah.
I think you decided on the tail end, well, hey, I drive really far every day to work.
Yeah. And I was like, great.
That time.
Hey, great. There's my answer right there. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. A solution.
Which is a great first step because it just slides right into your routine.
Yeah, but I hated it. It was like I wanted to listen to sports talk radio and it was really boring at first.
Yeah.
But I slogged through it. And I just remember having a conversation with one of the guys like uh I feel like it's kind of hard, but sometimes it's good. And I don't remember where the conversation went, but somehow we got talking about, well, how's your relationship with your wife? How's your relationship with your kids going? And I was like, still not there. I should probably carve some time out for them too. Maybe that'll help. And so I decided, you know what? Forget work on Tuesday and Thursday nights. That's going to be carved out for my family. Tuesday nights, I'm going to take one of the kids out for a date. Thursday nights, I'm dating my wife. And that was actually really awesome. Like I saw some improvement and my relationships are starting to improve. Shortly after that, though, I realized that my need for money was because our spending was out of control. And that was the heart of some of the stress of why I was so busy and why my relationship with my kids and wife was not as great as it could be is because I'm having to work so much is because our spending's out of control. So me and Mandy decided, dang it, we're going to get on a budget and start paying off some debt. I met with you and worked on some budget stuff and started taking that seriously, and we got on the same page. That was in January, We paid off like $80,000 in debt in that time. Um, and during that process, though, it went deeper. Started looking at the budget, started looking at my time, and thinking, why is my time still so strained? Because even though I've carved out time on Tuesday and Thursday nights with the kids, it still feels a little rushed. And sometimes date night doesn't happen. How come our money is still really tight, even though we're doing the budget and everything? And I really got to examine it. And this is what I realized. The reason my time was terrible is because I was waking up late in the morning, kind of groggy, because the night before I'd smashed 6 IPAs. And because I was groggy, I was not sharp on time at work. I was a little bit behind. And that rolled into my lunch hour. And that rolled into the second job I had, which rolled into my evenings, which would roll into the following day. And what I found myself in a cycle of is by 5, 6, 7 p.m. time was getting so stretched is because my mornings were rolling into my lunch. My lunch was rolling into my afternoon. My afternoon was rolling into my evenings. And by the time 5, 6, or 7 was rolling around, either all I could think about is, man, I need a beer. Or if it was date night, by 6 or 7, putting kids to bed, I was already too deep. And date night was not an option. I just wanted to chillax. Then I looked at my budget and realized how much I was spending on beers. Sorry, am I being too frank and vulnerable?
No, no, you're doing great.
I then was taking the lid off the box and looking at that thing and realizing this is not what I want. What I want is a healthy family. What I want is to know God. What I want is to have my life under control. Holy crap, this thing is crushing me. So I called Ron and I told him, "Hey Ron, yeah man, yeah, what's going on? Yeah, everything's going great. Yeah, we're good. Just working, rolling, going, bro. I'm great. But I was thinking, I should probably like maybe get alcohol out of my life because we're kind of doing this budget thing, and I think it's kind of hurting a little bit." And he's like, "Oh yeah, bro, that's a good idea. You should definitely do that." Tried to bootstrap it, and it wasn't working.
You
The old methods weren't working, and I think I was coming face to face with the reality of the situation. It was more than just a physical thing; it was a spiritual thing, and because I said something to Ron, "Hey, I think I might need to get this under control." That was a confession. That was like, it was half-ass for sure, but it was a confession and a little bit of repentance nonetheless. That started to, something spiritual started to happen there. And for 3 weeks, I really struggled trying to get it out of our life. 3 weeks, I was struggling with it, struggling with it. And finally, one night I had a crisis moment that almost sent me to the hospital. I woke up in the middle of the night. My blood pressure was like 158 or something over 120. It was insane. And I thought I needed to go to the hospital. And I woke up my wife and I said, what I was going to say is, I think I need some medical help. But what I said to her is, honey, I don't think I can stop drinking. And I think I have a problem. And then I started weeping. The fact I said that to my wife honestly and confessed it, there was power in that, Alex. There was power in it. And I started to get some of that power back. I could feel it in my soul right in that moment. And my blood pressure started to come down. Heart rate started to come down. And I went to sleep. The next morning, or actually that night, I called a recovery center to see if I needed to go to the hospital, but no one answered. So I just went to sleep.
very helpful.
The next morning, they called me back. And I talked to them a little bit, and it was a total stranger. But I kind of said the same thing to him, and I could tell he's a Jesus guy, because immediately he started speaking truth in life, and almost not scripture, but just biblical truths to me that bolstered up my spirit. And then there was another guy that I had a relationship with from the past experiences, that he's like one of those really like radical demon slayer type guys, walking around with tambourines and banners at church and stuff. Like, I'm just kidding. He's not that, but he's super charismatic. All right. Let's just say that. And he called me, and I confessed some things to him, and then started to got another step. And then our group was on hiatus during this time. We weren't meeting. But I called Ron and told him.
Mhm.
And with every time I said, "Hey, this is what's going on," and uh, I'd never done that before. I had always just only confessed or repented when it was the very last option because I got caught in my mess and I wasn't. I was going to figure it out on my own. That is not me anymore. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that I am strong whenever I confess the things that are getting in the way of me and Jesus. I'm weak when I hide them, which is the exact opposite of what I used to believe. What I used to believe is I am strong whenever I don't have visible weaknesses, when they're pushed down and hidden. That is when I'm strong. I don't believe that anymore. That is when I'm weak. When I'm hiding stuff is when I'm weak. My strength is in uh, uh, the vulnerability with other men that are on the path, part of the process too, that that are gonna fight the fight with me, or sit in my ashes with me, or be ready to pray for me or support me because they love me, because we both love Jesus. I'm not saying that just because you start vomiting all your garbage on the person that's behind you in the grocery store means you're going to get spiritual freedom. I don't think it works that way. Like whenever there is I don't want to use spiritual language, but a covenantal thing, like whenever you're around a table and you have these good faith agreements, like, hey, we're all here to be more like Jesus. Hey, we all believe in the Bible. Hey, we all agree that we want to be on the path or whatever. Like my wife, hey, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. And I believe that God is a God of our house, and we both love Jesus and want to be more like him. So that's our covenant together. Like when you confess to that type of person who's in that boat with you, there's power in it. And I've seen over the past several weeks of being on this new place that I'm at, a different level of freedom and spiritual strength that I've never had before, because the belief had to change. And not just about that confession repentance piece, but also my belief about alcohol. Like I thought socially acceptable, morally approved by Jesus. I mean, wedding at the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's what we get, right? Moderation and liberty. I believed all that stuff, and it looked pretty. It was a mask. I ripped that mask off. What I was hiding behind it was addiction. And addiction was trying to take me from my family. It was trying to take me from my job. It was trying to take me from my calling. It was trying to take me from the brotherhood that I said I wanted to be a part of. And if I thought about those other things, addiction would not have it. It wanted me only thinking about it. Once I realized what it was and that I had to kill it and send it back to hell where it came from, that's finally, I've never experienced freedom like that. It was like I confessed that. I said, Jesus, I want this out of my life. I prayed about it. Bam. It's like my whole spirit changed, where my body couldn't do that before. My body always wanted to go back. Now my body's following my spirit, and my spirit, it's different. So I don't know, man. That was a me verbally processing a lot of these things that are going on in my soul. I hope that makes sense. Like, ask questions and help
But
me.
what I find, my personal conviction, whether it's right or wrong, is yet to be proven, but I'm liking it so far, is that legalism has cause and effect backwards. And if you say these are the rules, they point you towards God, I don't know how compelling of an idea that is. I would rather let's build up the underlying belief. Like let's get to the core of the issue and strengthen that. And then you can come around to a rule if there needs to be one. And we talk about standards a lot and how those are a voluntary step into submission, right?
Yeah,
I personally do not believe that alcohol is bad for everyone. Like, I don't think that everyone in the world needs to avoid alcohol, that every Christian in the world needs to avoid alcohol. But I do think if that's a struggle that you have, if that's something that God is leading you, if that's a freedom that God is leading you into, um, voluntarily giving that up in pursuit of glorifying Him is the right answer.
absolutely. I
And I think,
completely agree with that.
like, I think you can come around to the rule in freedom instead of saying, here's the rule, I have to do this. You can say, you know,
Exactly.
what do I actually want my life to look like? What do I want my pursuit of God to look like? And does this thing feed that or does it hinder that? And if it hinders that, let's just give it up because God is better than this thing anyway.
Yeah, that's the question. Not like what are the things that like the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, what do I got to do to get into heaven?" Jesus says, "Well, follow the commandments. Have you done that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've done all of it. I've done all of it." He goes, "Well, here's the one
Super.
thing you lack. Here's the one thing you lack. Why don't you sell everything you own and give it to the poor?" That's not a commandment. That's not like a scriptural thing. Jesus was just meeting where he was at. And he's like, that's the one thing you don't want to give me. That's the one thing you're holding on. That's the thing that's getting in the way of you and me. Why don't you
And
give that up?
that's the next step. That's what, like, that's the thing. And what's interesting about your story, we didn't, like, as a group, I mean, I was there for all of those conversations. We didn't tell you to do any of this.
No, no,
Like,
no.
there was no, hey, okay, so here's how you get your life in order. Go follow step A, B, C, D. Um, I am very careful in the things that I teach to not push beliefs on people. What I want to do instead is nurture your specific beliefs. Like, you have core beliefs that are different from mine.
Yeah.
What I want to do is teach you how to nurture those and grow them up into whatever God wants them to be. I don't want to dictate to you, here's how you should live your life. I want to say, okay, let's just respond in real time to what God is doing. And you get to decide how you engage with that. And I find it so fascinating that you took to it so aggressively and that you have just gotten so much done in the
I've,
last 6 months.
it's been incredible. It's been really incredible. It's a Holy Spirit thing. But like here's the deal. Since I was a kid, the Lord has been in pursuit of me. And it's been something I've tried to figure out the bulk of my life. And I think that's one of the interesting things about grace and God. I mean, we talk about like predestination and sovereignty and free will and all that stuff. The reality is, in my experience, God met me where I was at and wasn't like so rude and demanding like that he immediately took me to uh get alcohol out of your life or whatever. Um it's been a long journey and it's something that I've been searching for ever since I was a little kid. And it just so happens that at the, ripe age of 40, based on a bunch of circumstances that are kind of wild, like I never should have met you. I never should have gone to church with you guys. Like the whole story of how we ended up there was us just trying to meander through our wilderness and figure out where we needed to be. And there was all these serendipitous circumstances that led us to that place at that time that you guys happened to be there. I mean, that's a little bit beyond uh the realm of like highly probable.
Right.
If we would have been a couple months later, I never would have met you. If it would have been a couple months early, I don't know. It was like the perfect timing for us to get there to meet you. Like I look back at it now and I'm like, oh man, God's all that time I was kind of meandering through trying to find what I have now, and God's hand was gently guiding me through all of that, not forcefully. Um, and this, regardless of what you believe about that, sovereignty and all that free will stuff, I know this today. My relationship with Jesus is stronger than it's ever been. And my desire for his presence, like you remember when I said in the Jeep, it was hard to do the worship and prayer and Bible stuff. Now I hunger for it. My appetites change. Like every day I get in the Jeep, it's like, oh man, I gotta get that whatever scripture's in my head. I gotta listen to it. I gotta ruminate on that. Uh, like my hunger is for that more than it ever has been in my whole life. That's always been a struggle of like the disciplines, and I've always been attracted to them because I felt like in them I would find freedom. But like you were saying, that's a backwards way of looking at it. Find the relationship first, and that'll point you to the disciplines. The disciplines don't drive you to the relationship, I guess is how I would say it.
Yeah, because if you're genuinely pursuing something, if you're genuinely interested in knowing more about God and even knowing more about Him in specific ways, right?
Yeah,
Um, you're prone to seek it out instead of saying, okay, well, I have to read my Bible for 30 minutes today because that's good stewardship or whatever you would say in that moment. Um, like what if you just wake up every morning and there's something that you want to find in the Bible?
yeah, yeah,
You have a question that you're like, is there an answer to this in here? And if so, what is it? Where is it? Um, I just I think it's so much more compelling to be in pursuit than to be in obedience.
yeah, yeah.
I,
That's a good way to.
I,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean,
think.
you need to be in obedience as well, but I would rather be in pursuit and then obedience than obedience and then pursuit
Well,
personally.
that's kind of how like I felt like I finally said, okay, Jesus, you can have a little bit of my life genuinely. Poke at the stuff you want to poke at. He's like, okay, I'll poke you where you're willing to be poked at. Why don't you work on that? And I was like, okay, I will. And out of that obedience grew deeper obedience. And out of that obedience grew deeper obedience. And now I'm at this place where I'm looking at my life and thinking, like, oh man, there's so much stuff that I need the Lord's redemptive work in. There's just the next thing. Alcohol's like, that's the last thing. Now it's on to the next thing, which will soon become the last thing after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do think that genuine pursuit and passion. This is why passion. So one of the things that I don't talk about as much in the podcast is I think that if you can just start with passion and then move to capacity, which is exactly what you did. Like if
Yeah.
we can just ignite the fire and then just free up a little bit of space in your life, then you have been primed for life change. Like if we can just get you wanting more of God, having some extra space in your life, I really do think that the rest of it, I mean, it doesn't just happen because that denies what you contribute to the exchange. But I do think that you have created fertile ground at that point for life change to happen, where
Totally. It's
you're talking to God, you're listening to Him,
yeah.
you're wanting more of Him, and He says, okay, you're ready to go, let's go.
So you're familiar with the parable of the sower, where the seed gets sown. Some of it falls on rocky ground, some of it falls on ground with thorns, some of it falls on other types of soil that aren't so great. But then some of the seed falls on good soil. Well, why is that soil good? It's because it's been plowed up, it's been worked, it's been and 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 it's like we get so distracted and hard and allow space for the enemy in our lives in all these different areas because we're so busy. Like you're saying, if you just create just a little bit of space, not, you don't have to be a monk. You don't gotta take a vow of chastity. Like just a little bit of space and allow Jesus to plant some seed there. But you have to make the space, and that's the work. Like that's the work I had to do is I had to find the space and start there. Jesus met me there. And then
Mm.
from that, more space was created, and then all of a sudden it was exponential. Um, and so, yeah, I'm. I would love to discuss that
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's let you go. Get back to your family. I'd love to talk to you again. I'd love to do this again. So
more. Right on.
let's plan
Well,
on
hey,
that.
dude, I love it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.